A large orange-haired, cloaked man stands at the village gates filling in entrance paperwork. As the camera zooms out to a top of a building, there we see a young blonde male standing looking out over the village. With one great yell it says, "It's great to be back home!" as he looks down from the pillar he had stood upon. Down there he sees 4 individuals. He jumps down in excitement as he sees his girlfriend, Hinata. He would jump down, immediately grasping her in a hug, which would leave her red-faced because they haven't really seen each other in the last 3 years. But she shrugs it off. She's happy to see Naruto, and as she's about to say as she pushes away, Naruto would grab her into a kiss. The other 3 individuals that had been with the girl, being Konohamaru, son of the 3rd Hokage, and his little team, would basically remark on how disgusting it is, except the girl, Moegi. She would actually go on a spiel about how it's romantic, blah 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 blah. And yeah, Naruto would finally break the kiss to basically exclaim how much he missed her over the span of over the last 3 years, and how he wants to go say hi to everyone at the Hyuga compound. He wants to go do so, but the man with orange hair would stop him. He'd say, "Naruto, don't forget, Jiraiya said we had to check in with Lady Tsunade first." Naruto would shrug and say, "Okay, Hinata, you go wait for me at the Hyuga compound. Me and Jugo over here are gonna go to Lady Tsunade," as he jumps off along with his ginormous friend. As Naruto and his friend are about to enter the Hokage office, they are stopped by yet another group of people. This would be Sakura, who didn't leave off with Naruto on good terms, Kiba, who is one of the people that were basically in the academy with Naruto, and last of all, Neji Hyuga. Neji would remark on how he's gotten a lot stronger and that he thinks he'd be able to outdo Naruto for once, while Naruto smugly replies with, "Whoa, Mr. Hotshot, Mr. Prodigy himself, I've gotten a lot stronger myself. So maybe we should get into a fight to see who wins this time." Jugo would quickly interrupt, saying that they don't have time. Lady Tsunade wants them there now. Naruto would shrug and agree as Kiba says, Hey, you never even said hi to me, you bastard." With Naruto further ignoring him just to, shove at his ego that bit more as they enter the Hokage's office. As they enter the Hokage's office, they get a smile from Tsunade asking how the training trip went. Naruto and Jugo were about to speak as Jiraiya basically jumps through the window saying, "Don't worry about that, Tsunade. They've gotten extremely stronger. They might be even able to take us on in a fight." Tsunade would agree as Hinata would walk into the Hokage's office. Naruto would be surprised, and Hinata would then, with a stern face, look at him and say, "Well, if you didn't run off as fast, I would have told you that I needed to be here too." Basically getting a shrug out of Naruto. Tsunade would then call in yet another person, being Kakashi. It would turn out that she wanted Naruto and Hinata, along with their new Team 7 member, Jugo, to retake the bell test. They would agree, with Naruto saying some smug comments on how he's pretty sure he could take out Kakashi on his own, with Hinata basically just giggling and saying that, "I'm not sure if I'm strong enough to take on Kakashi Sensei yet, but I'll be there someday." Naruto would basically take intrigue to this, raising a brow, while Tsunade would basically give herself a pat on the back for the good work she did training Hinata. Tsunade would then reveal that the meanings of this would be to scale not only their but their new teammate Jugo's power to be able to accurately classify them. This would prevent Naruto from needing to take another Chunin exam and hopelessly beat around some genin. At least that's what Tsunade would say. To be honest, this would probably more be thing to where they could accurately depict what Jugo's strength is, since even though Jiraiya had most probably pushed him to his limit, she still needs to see this for herself. So that night they would meet back up at the training grounds. But before we get into that, let's get to the Hyuga reunions. As soon as Naruto steps back into the Hyuga compound, he almost immediately gets attacked by Hiashi, who wants to know all the new skills that Naruto has learned to improve his Jugen stance. Naruto would smirk and say that his Jugen stance has nearly been mastered, but he feels that he is not quite there yet. But he has learned some other techniques that would greatly improve how he functions. He thinks that Hiashi would agree with some of the things that he has figured out, especially since their techniques of the Toad Sage he has modified to suit the Hyuga techniques. Hiashi would smirk and say that he can't wait to see it at tonight's battle. Naruto would ask him how he'd know, and Hiashi would just shrug it off. That night when they do get to the training grounds, Naruto would basically sense that there are a bunch of people in the trees, and as he looks up, he sees about half the shinobi in the village watching. Yeah, they want to see this. Naruto left off on a really strong note, so they want to see just how powerful he's gotten over these last 3 years. So basically, Naruto, being more ready than ever, would step up, basically being followed by Jugo and Hinata. Something that I did not mention is Jugo was introduced to the Hyuga clan, and just like Naruto, he would have an eternal home there. As I never actually mentioned this in the first part, but Naruto does live at the Hyuga compound. He does have his own apartment, but he spends more time there than he does at home. So let's continue. As the test starts, Kakashi is obviously nervous. He knows just what Naruto and Hinata could have done before this time skip, and he knows that Hinata had been training under Lady Tsunade, while Naruto had been training under Jiraiya. So he could be in a lot of trouble. And as the fight basically starts off, Naruto would start it off strong. Before Kakashi could even say start, just like in the original, he starts off with a technique he had not had in the original, called the 360 rotations, a technique he locked in the 1 month between the Chunin exams and the Chunin exams final. Kakashi would have basically prepped for this by having his Sharingan unsheathed, barely being able to dodge this ferocious strike from Naruto, as he thinks to himself that Naruto had gotten a lot faster. So what he just shrugs it off to is him being a little rusty. And as he brings up the fact that he never said start, Naruto would shrug, continuing his onslaught. Kakashi would basically just say, Naruto, you always do this, as he screams starts and disappears in a puff of smoke, replacing himself with a log. Naruto would say, dang it, he used a substitution, as he hears movement in the bushes behind him. He wants to attack to only see that it's Jugo. Naruto would say, Jugo, you're supposed to be in the trees, while Jugo basically says that I would be in the trees, but he's over on that side. Naruto would shrug and say, yeah, I know that, as they continue to attack Kakashi. So I'm not gonna go too into depth, but I'm just gonna go over the moves that Naruto, Jugo, and Hinata have learned over this time. Hinata had the 100 healing seal, but she would not be using it in this fight. Naruto and Jugo had gotten their respective forms of Sage mode, Naruto getting the Toad Sage, and Jugo basically mastering or somewhat controlling the curse mark state. He doesn't get as angry when entering it, but it does give him that adrenaline boost, so he needs to keep his emotions in check. Hinata has gotten the insane strength of Lady Tsunade, along with learning her nature transformation, along with starting the Twin Lion Fist, or at least the start of the creation of the Twin Lion Fist, while Naruto had not only gotten a new Rasengan, which he calls the Expansive Dome Rasengan, which is something of my creation, and basically what it is, it takes the concept of the Rasengan, turning a giant, surrounding a person, and literally shredding them. Naruto has a little bit of this personality where if he needs to kill someone, he would, but he'd rather not. So along with that, he had also discovered his wind attribute affinity and had gotten the Rasen Shuriken. It is something he does not prefer using because of his basically Hyuga nature and him preferring to fight close range. He would have also gotten a bond with a very specific tail called Gamakichi. Gamakichi is the son of the boss toad Gamabunta, and him and Naruto really get along. He would never actually have been able to mount Gamakichi in the way of Gamakichi being able to generate Sage Chakra for him, but he did negotiate a deal with the Nine Tails if ever needed that he would do that in place. Naruto had also obtained the key to the Nine Tails, but did not yet feel comfortable releasing the Nine Tails from his cage. They still got a few issues they need to work out. Along with that, Jugo had also learned some techniques from Jiraiya, things like the Jizo, which is basically the hair technique, but it's obviously different. This is a technique they basically developed for Jugo while he is in the curse mark state. He could basically use extra parts of his body that grew upon it to activate the Jizo and basically shoot it off of his body or even grow it over him if needed to basically be able to use as a shield. This basically will come in clutch in any close quarters situation where he would be outsped, which is highly unlikely, but if it happens, he does have something to counter that. So it's pretty easy to say that Naruto knows teamwork is the thing, and instead of grabbing it, he would still pull up the Ichi Paradise thing. Him himself would not answer it, but I'm gonna take some liberations and say that Jugo actually read it because he got told to, and he's really not going to be like, oh, I don't like it, and stop reading it. So when Naruto brings it up, Jugo can actually spoil it for Kakashi, and that way they still get the belt, even though they could have easily overpowered him. Everyone would be impressed with Tsunade being a little frustrated that Naruto had read it, with him revealing that he actually didn't, but Jugo did. So Tsunade would go on her rant about how children should not be reading this, even though Jugo's basically a nano, blah blah blah. So we're gonna move on. A small break would take place here with everyone getting back together, until Naruto gets informed that the Kazekage, aka Gaara, had basically been kidnapped. This would basically greatly excite Naruto because he can finally prove himself, but he's also a little sad because his friend Gaara just got nipped, so he needs to go. He'd basically say that him and Jugo could easily handle this, where Jiraiya had already left the village, but Tsunade would say that this would be a Team 7 mission. Naruto knows that Hinata and Kakashi would not be able to keep up with basically him and Jugo at full speed, so they'd basically agree and travel at normal shinobi pace. By the time they do get there, they stumble across an injured Kankuro. Basically what this would be is that they would have ran into Granny Chiho as soon as they entered the building, with her attacking Kakashi, exclaiming that, "White Fang! I will kill you for you killing myself," or whatever the fuck she said in canon, with Naruto quickly basically debunking that, saying that Kakashi is the White Fang's son and not the White Fang himself, so the Granny should calm down. Chiho would quickly calm down and assess the situation, basically going over to Hinata, who had started basically going over Kankuro. She would basically explain that Kankuro is under a poison that's incurable, explain the poison, all that type of stuff, while Hinata does her entire thing. She would then tell to Naruto and Jugo that they need to go out and get this certain herb so that they could heal him. Chiyo is highly regretting that Hinata, the shy little girl, would be able to heal Kankuro. Naruto would quickly go get it, being able to travel much faster than he did with Kakashi and Hinata, because, to be honest, their minds would probably be broken at the speed him and Jugo actually travel at. By the time they get back, Hinata had already started the healing process, and them bringing the herbs back so quickly would help her get it done. Soon as she gets it done, Chiyo would be amazed and offer to go with the group. They would then head out and follow a track of Kakashi summoning basically his summoning dog. after Kakashi did summon this dog, it found a trail that they would then follow. As they travel the path, Team Kakashi would eventually run into what is seemingly Itachi Uchiha, which they only know as Sasuke's older brother and a traitor to the Leaf. So they would immediately almost basically start fighting. Naruto would really quickly realize that they are all under a genjutsu, and with a massive spike of chakra would break everyone out. The Itachi clone, as we the fans know it, would basically be surprised that Naruto was able to find out that quickly, and not only that, but break everyone around them out of the jutsu. So now a close quarters fight would occur, with Team 7 having some kind of struggle, but still eventually being able to beat the clone, which then they would find out is a clone as it fell into another person. Somewhere else, Team Guy had been on a support mission for Team 7, and they had run into Kisame Hoshigaki, or as we now know, a clone of Kisame Hoshigaki. There would be an entire fight, basically this being the first time that Kisame and Guy met in this timeline, and they had exchanged some words. Kisame clone being basically surprised that Guy was able to take him out only in the 4th or 5th gate in this continuity, while basically this would mean that they could move on to the bigger threat. Both of them would follow their paths and eventually stumble across the Akatsuki base, which is protected by a seal. Jugo, who had been focusing mainly on seals with his time with Jiraiya, would basically point out that this is a 4-point seal, which would mean that 4 people would need to go to separate seal locations and disarm the seals at the exact same time. Team Guy would reveal that they had brought walkie-talkies or communication or whatever the fuck you want to call it, while Neji basically found the seal locations using his Byakugan. Team Guy would then move out and gave an extra comm system to Team 7 so that they could keep in contact with each other. As time comes and they rip off the seals, instead of the seal being undone, something else happens. 4 equal clones of each member of Team Guy would be created. They would then have to fight their counterparts, but because none of them would actually change, that fight would go completely to canon. And eventually, when they are defeated and the seal is dropped, Jugo would use a Sage Art amped hand to basically destroy the boulder really quickly. They would then find a dead Gaara and basically Deidara sitting on top of him and Sasori standing behind him. This would sort of initiate the things that happen in canon, except they have an extra member in Jugo. Jugo is going to be a real key part to this because I feel he can change this fight dramatically. I'm going to put him with Hinata and Chio. They're going to stay back and fight Sasori, while Deidara, who had grabbed Gaara's body and flew off on a clay doll, would be chased by Naruto and Kakashi as in the original. Naruto is a lot faster and confident he can outspeed Deidara, but he decides to lay back with Kakashi as he'd hear from Kakashi that he has an idea. Kakashi would be pouring chakra into his eye as he has a flashback of something that happened in the time skip. He had been training his Sharingan restlessly to try and get his chakra reserve to the point where it would basically be at its peak while using the Sharingan, so he could use it for extended periods of time. And in doing so, he had discovered a new ability in the Mangekyo Sharingan, which he calls Kamui. Basically, over long distances, he can make things seemingly go into a different dimension, which he feels he can do here to try and save Gaara. He could put the other guy into this different dimension, as Gaara would drop and then Naruto would have to grab him. As every good what if would implement, that's not exactly how it's gonna go. Kakashi would proceed to try and fail as he only removes one of Deidara's arms, which only incentivizes the masochist to start throwing bombs down on them, which would make this a lot harder. Kakashi would say that his chakra reserve just took a great hit and then it would take a while for him to charge up another shot, and he'd ask Naruto if he knows any long-range jutsu. Naruto would sadly only know the Rasengan Shuriken, which he knows he should not be using because last time he used it, his arm got pretty injured, and he can't really generate any chakra while running. He'd relay this to Kakashi, as Kakashi would ask him if there's anything else they could do. He'd have an idea and quickly go through hand signs as he bites his finger, stops on a pole, and hits it on the ground, or on the pole. Out would come a ninja toad, slightly bigger than Naruto. This would be Gamakichi, the person he's made a bond with. He would ask Gamakichi to basically just let him sit on him and run while he generates nature energy. Gamakichi would remark on how Naruto is probably hella heavy, and that would be a lot of effort, so if he wants him to do it, Naruto would have to give him some snacks. Naruto would quickly agree, and they would make a move on, quickly catching up to Kakashi. Now we have two people in meditation. Naruto would tell Kakashi to break out of him trying to use Kamui and just make sure no explosions knock Naruto off, because if it does, something really bad could happen. Kakashi doesn't exactly know what would happen, so he'd proceed to just use some semi-long range jutsu to get rid of the explosion. Naruto, only after a few minutes, would have quickly basically charged up Sage mode and would have pulled up his hand, standing on top of Gamakichi as he says jump, as basically a ball with seemingly a shuriken around it would have formed as he throws it at Deidara. Deidara would basically be scared of this and say, "Oh no, that thing's gigantic and it's coming right towards me," as he basically gets his bird to swoop away. This would once again miss, putting Naruto and Kakashi in yet another sticky predicament. Naruto would rub his chin, saying, didn't quite get him. Wait, I got an idea. As he basically puts his hands in the shadow clone thing, and in the time skip, unlike in the original, I did give him the ability to do the multi-shadow clone jutsu, which he would now perform, creating a chain of clones which would basically get him almost to Deidara, as Deidara basically lets off an explosion. As the real Naruto would come running up the chain would quickly be disrupted, but Naruto would not be trifled. He would jump off, quickly starting to rotate his body, saying 360 rotation as he grows ever closer to Deidara. He can't quite reach him as he breaks out of the rotation, forming a Rasengan in his hand, as an air palm would be cast behind him from one of the clones, shooting him even further, landing a giant Rasengan on one of Deidara's birds, sending it down crashing. This would also dislocate basically Gaara from the bird's grip, as Naruto would try and grab Deidara. Kakashi would catch Gaara's lifeless body. As Naruto was on the verge of getting Deidara, he would have summoned another bird and got away. Naruto would jump down to see if Gaara is okay, since their mission is not to catch these guys, but to find Gaara. As he gets down there, Gaara had been dead, and seeing his lifeless body would send Naruto into a frenzy. Naruto would look up to the sky for a Deidara who had been circling them, trying to basically find the perfect place to drop a bomb, or at least stall until he could drop a big enough bomb to get rid of them. Naruto would burst out into a Four Tails aura, still completely in control, without it going into stage 2, as he basically uses one of the clones that had remained to shoot himself up after already jumping an insane distance. And this would basically scare Deidara half to death, as Naruto is enclosing. He would grab the bird Deidara was standing on, throwing it to the ground, and grabbing Deidara mere milliseconds after doing so. This would basically make Deidara think that, yeah, he's pretty much done, as he decides to basically, go kaboom, or self-detonate, as you would say. Naruto would see this coming, as basically Deidara would start inflating. As soon as Naruto had grabbed him, he had started eating the clay in his pouches from his hands. So this would basically lead somewhat to what it did in canon with Deidara exploding. Naruto would see that this would probably kill him, so he started upping in tails, getting to the point where he was in the 7 tails, going into the second state, and also building up enough defense to where he thinks he could survive. Kurama at this point is just trying to push the last tail, because if he could just get into the 8th tail, he could probably take over. But that would not happen, as Kakashi would basically Kamui the explosion away,
while basically Naruto would start calming down, growing out of the tails. He would then land next to Kakashi, basically on his knees, crying over Gaara's body. Deidara would most likely survive just like in canon, but before we get into the Gaara getting brought back, let's go over the Sasori fight. A curse mark amped Jugo, only on his right arm, fully in control, would jump at Sasori, trying to scale his power as Sasori tries to strike the other side with his poison stinger, meeting basically Chio, who would throw some kunai with chakra string at Sasori, causing him to jump back before his attack would land, cutting open his robes, revealing his puppet body. Chio would say that Jugo has to be more careful. If that stinger landed, he would have been dead. Hinata here doesn't have any of the herb that they had to save Kankuro, and if he gets hit, he will die. Jugo would nod as if he was finally taking it seriously, as Sasori in his puppet body would jump up to the sky, revealing a giant mouth on his stomach, which would then proceed to shoot out thousands of poisonous needles. They would quickly start dodging these, and as Sasori would try and keep them at a range with a combination of the needles and his tail if they get too close, he would eventually proceed to hit Hinata. She would quickly get frozen, and Chio would say that there's no time to make an antidote. So she requests that she allows her to use her body as a puppet. Hinata would quickly agree, not wanting to be put in a position where more of those arrows could hit her, since she knows she might be able to resist the poison for long enough to get back to the village and actually her curing herself. So Chio would start using her body as her very own puppet. As Chio starts using Hinata's body to strategically dodge and try to hit Sasori, she would really quickly discover that Hinata had not only her near perfect medical skill, but also her monstrous strength, which basically Tsunade was known for, which would not only confirm Chio's suspicions of basically Hinata's group becoming the next Sannin, but basically puts her confidence in this fight to a whole nother level. Because with her skill and Hinata's epic strength, they could do a lot of damage. As this hooded figure stands up and turns around to look at Chio, she would see Sasori's face, remarking on how it doesn't look a day older since she last saw him. Sasori would have a small conversation with his grandmother as he pulls out a scroll summoning two puppets. This would be the mama and papa puppet, or the mom and dad puppet, from basically that same fight. Chio would start having flashbacks to when Sasori was a kid and they created these puppets, and would also remark on how powerful these puppets truly are. So now, in another frenzy, in a much deeper situation, Jugo is basically pushed to going a lot harder since these puppets have range. Unless he could destroy these puppets, they really don't have a chance. Chio would basically distract them as Jugo requested so that he could go into a berserker state, which he also warns as soon as he goes into this state, he wants Chio to get the hell out of there. Chio would basically smile and say that she'll guarantee the time brought and she'd guarantee Hinata's safety, as Jugo would go into a deep trance preparing to go into this berserker state. He would eventually get into this state semi in control, but knows if he fights enough, he will completely lose control and not know what would happen until Naruto or Kakashi gets there to incapacitate him. But they need to do this or all of them would die. As he screams out, "Leave!" Chio and Hinata would basically jump out of the cave while he quickly takes care of Sasori and his two puppets. Sasori would then remark on how he has to rely on this, as he basically pulls out a lot of scrolls from behind him using chakra strings, as he then summons 100 puppets. Jugo in his berserker state would be able to destroy quite a few puppets, but he would not be able to handle them by himself, as his stamina would quickly fade in this berserker state, fighting off against so many puppets. Outside of the cave, Chio would talk about how those are probably all humanoid puppets, which Sasori created from deceased bodies. As she tells Hinata that she's gonna let her down there, Hinata, barely still being able to move, would start the process of trying to heal herself.
Chiyo, on the other hand, would summon the 10 legendary puppets, which were rumored to be able to destroy a nation. As Chiyo with her puppets walks into the cave, Sasori would remark on how those are the puppets that Chiyo swore to never unleash, while Chiyo says that he has lost his humanity and she will use it to atone for her sins of letting him down and letting his parents down. As Sasori feels the first real emotion he's felt in years, screaming out in anger at his grandma for basically saying these things, because he thinks this is the best he could have possibly been, and she has no right bringing his parents into this. If it wasn't for her, they would still be alive. Hinata, who had just basically healed herself after a series of flashbacks between the two, would have been able to sucker punch Sasori, basically cracking his face on the side,
revealing to Chiyo that Sasori had in fact turned himself into a human puppet. Chiyo, not having that information, would basically know that it's too late to try and retrieve that little bit of humanity she hoped he had left, and all that's left is to destroy Sasori and all his puppets. After this fight drags on for a little bit longer, the team starts getting worn down. Jugo barely basically maintaining control of his berserker state, Hinata being drained of chakra after constantly using the Byakugan to destroy chakra string connecting to puppets, sometimes having to destroy puppets that sneak up on her, and Chiyo's 10 legendary puppets being targeted by some of the more powerful of Sasori's 100. Sasori, now low on puppets, would decide to detach the weaklings he had left, pulling out the last scroll he held on his back. And out came a familiar sight, a cloaked man with iron sand flying behind him. As Sasori started laughing, Chiyo would think to herself, that's the third Kazekage, the wielder of the iron sand. Sasori must have, as she remembers them finding the third Kazekage's corpse after the tuning exams, Sasori would start throwing attacks to everyone, more potent than even the separate forces of all 100 previous puppets. Chiyo would basically scream out loud that that's the third Kazekage turned into a puppet. It has a devastating iron sand release. Everyone, watch out. This is easily his strongest puppet. Jugo, knowing that he is most likely going to have to carry this fight, would try to step up. Chiyo, basically seeing his eyes bulge, would tell the boy to step back. She'll handle this. She still has her main 3 puppets. As she attacks Sasori, they'd go into a frenzy, with Chiyo eventually getting the puppet of the third Kazekage in trap. Triangle vortex as it sucks them in between, and they just start pulverizing it. Seemingly having the upper edge, the puppets sadly fall, with Sasori seemingly coming out victorious, Chiyo barely able to stand. Sasori would smirk as he said, "Looks like my puppets are better, grandmother," breaking out in a fit of laughter once again, as yet another sucker punch from Hinata would occur, this time not landing on Sasori but his beloved puppet. Seemingly there's a bunch of chakra gathered around her hand. It looks like it's trying to form something, but she'd fall to her knees coughing up blood, seemingly having run out of chakra. Sasori, wide-eyed, seeing his perfect puppet being destroyed, its head caved in by this girl, infuriates him. He screams out loud in a state of panic, mumbling to himself, "I beat the crone only to be destroyed by some girl." He can't help it. He launches his puppet body at Hinata, trying to land the final blow. He knows she's weak, but he doesn't care. This would be met from a Jugo that finally snaps from being in this state, and it just starts pulverizing on Sasori, almost shattering every piece of his puppet body. Naruto leaps into the cave as a Kakashi carrying a lifeless Gaara enters behind him. Naruto would quickly try to calm Jugo down by tanking some hits, activating his cloaks, knowing that Jugo is about as dangerous as something like a four-tailed cloak while in this state, at least while fatigued. could be much more dangerous when fully unleashed. Jugo would quickly come to his senses, breaking down in tears, thinking he had lost Hinata and thinking that he had disappointed Naruto. Naruto would quickly lift up a crying Jugo, telling him that it's all okay. Thanks to him, everyone survived. It's gonna be okay, as Jugo would faint in Naruto's arms. Naruto would lay him down as he goes to pick up Hinata, who had already tried to start healing herself, but she had been out of chakra. She'd tell Naruto that all the stronger she needs a little rest. And also they need to get back to the sand. She needs some of that herb before she falls to that poison the same way Conqueror almost did. Naruto, now in a state of depression, knowing that he couldn't save Hinata, he couldn't save Gaara, and he smack damn almost couldn't save Jugo. His lips start shaking and his hands start trembling as he looks down at the floor with a sad look. Chio, who was looking at a Kakashi who was leaving the cave, would tell to Naruto that it's not his fault. There's nothing he could have done, but there is something he could do to help her. Naruto would look up with a slimmer of hope in his eyes, following the old lady. Now outside of the cave, people from the sand had arrived, back up, now crying around the dead Gaara. As Chio would come up and give a speech about how the next generation should continue on and fill the void that she left. She had completed all that she needed within this time period, as she starts pouring chakra into Gaara. She'd look back to Naruto and say, "Hey kid, this is what I needed you for. I need a little bit more chakra." As Naruto would hopefully pour chakra into her, hoping that Gaara would come back. Gaara would start breathing, inhaling quickly as he sat up. Naruto would have expression of joy on his face as he rushes in to hug the now conscious Gaara. Gaara would be confused, thinking that he was in the hands of the Akatsuki, but here is his blonde-headed friend Naruto. He would look back and see Chio on the ground, as this would also pull Naruto's attention. As Naruto shifts his eyes to Chio, he'd once again have a look of disappointment on his face, having lost yet another person. Naruto, not the only one that seemed to have lost faith in themselves throughout the process of this bout, diverts his attention to his teammate Jugo. Jugo would be an interesting find, for him and Jiraiya had discovered him while looking for Sasuke. They had found him in a forest in seemingly the middle of nowhere. He had trailed from a prison they were about to check for Sasuke, but by the time they did check the prison, nothing was there. The only set of footprints they found led to a primal Jugo. As Naruto would ask Jugo what's wrong, Jugo would have flashbacks to when he rampaged, hurt Naruto, and put a hole in Jiraiya's chest. Yes, in this basically world, it would have been Jugo who had put the hole in Jiraiya's chest, not Naruto. So he feels like he could have done more, not only to keep himself under control, but to protect Lady Hinata, who he thinks of as what he does Naruto. Naruto is his replacement for Kimimaro, the person that keeps him sane, the person that keeps him down to earth, the person that keeps him him. When he saw Hinata get hurt, he went into a spill of rage, thinking he had failed Naruto, the only person, there for him right now, the only person to care about him. Naruto, realizing that this is what Jugo is feeling right now, without him having to even say much, would embrace his friend in a hug. As this happens, the rubble would move around inside the cave they had left behind, as a red head puppet with some joints missing would rise up, saying, "Guess they didn't realize my heart. Maybe I should try and find the Akatsuki," as he would head to another base. Sasori in this continuity had survived, so he will once again be a threat for the future. As the Leaf Shinobi, being Team 7 and Team Guy, had made their way back to the Leaf, they would have some time to relax. Because unlike in canon, because of Jugo's rage and Naruto having to interfere at the end, Sasori would have no need to tell them about Kabuto. So they wouldn't have the entire bridge arc, for there would be nothing leading up to it. So we're going to be filling it in with our own mini arc right here, calling it the Hot Spring arc. This is going to be a mini arc where we take Team 7, specifically Naruto, Jugo, and Hinata, and some other side characters from the Naruto series, and putting them into a hot spring situation to progress the romantical plot of the series. So we start off with Naruto and Hinata basically deciding they were going to go to the hot springs because they haven't been together too much and they wanted to spend some more time together. They could chillax there and then at night just basically talk about what happened in these 3 years, basically finding every possible thing out that they could about each other's progression. Jugo would obviously force himself in because he already felt like a failure when it came to the entire Kazekage arc, and he really can't let anything happen to Naruto again. And Naruto is smart enough right now to know that Jugo would not emotionally be able to handle it if there was even a random attack that didn't even do any damage. Jugo just needs to be with him right now. So after some talking, Naruto would convince Hinata to let Jugo come along. He wouldn't directly be interfering with anything they're doing, he's just going to kind of be in the background. She'd let it happen since she had started liking the orange-haired oaf. She said that he reminded her of Naruto, so she could get along with him. So we're going to have a little skip to when they actually do get to the hot springs and actually sign in. We skip to them splitting up to the separate hot springs to where Naruto would encounter Team 10 and Team 8. He'd be confused. He'd obviously not had expected them to be here, and neither would they of him. They would basically go over how they had just come back from a collab mission and decided to come relax at the hot springs. Obviously meaning that basically Ino and Sakura were in the other stall with Hinata. They would quickly explain the same thing and start their girly chat. Kiba, being the only dunce stupid enough to actually peek, would basically trigger Naruto, giving off a large amount of bloodlust that no one really thought that Naruto of all people had, which would basically just cause Kiba to get PTSD back to the Chunin exams to when he just got mollywopped by Naruto, which would obviously make him back off. The females would soon catch on that Kiba was at one point snooping, so it would cause a little fight. As the fight between the two teams broke out, with Shikamaru and Choji trying to calm it down, Shino being Shino, and more or less, Jugo got caught up in the middle of it. He even started showing some emotions, smiling, laughing, finally fitting in with the people around him. He felt more happy than he ever could. But into the thick of it, Hinata and Naruto had slipped out and had gone back to their room because it was getting a little too hectic for their taste. When they do get there, they're gonna have a little scene. They would sit down, basically talking back and forth about how hectic that just was and that they're glad that they could finally get out. Naruto would basically move a little closer, putting his hand on top of Hinata's, basically causing both of them to blush, look away, and look back at each other. As Naruto would try to lean forward to kiss her, she would try and rock back, because she still has a little of that shy personality, and since Naruto's been gone, she's changed a little, and she doesn't think the exact same way. She's not as suppressive. She wants to be more in control of situations as of late. So when this happens, it would basically cause the both of them to tumble, Naruto's hand to land on Hinata's oppai, making her blush, scream as the rest of the people fall through the door, having seemingly followed them to try and spy. Jugo would be like, Master Naruto, are you okay? I heard a tumble. As Ino and Sakura would remark on how Naruto's a pervert, with Kiba just saying nice. And at this point, we'd hear another familiar voice. Oh, Naruto! My youthful rival! I did not know you were here! As Neji would come across seeing Naruto with his hand on Hinata's breast. Naruto, that is really disrespectful to Lady Hinata. She is a noble of the Hyuga clan in Leaf Village. You should not be doing this in such public place. I'm pretty sure Lord Hiyashi would allow you a private room in the compound. With Naruto quickly jumping to his feet, just frantically trying to explain that that's not what really happened, it was an accident. Neji, obviously having only done this to tease Naruto, would just smirk in success, as Tenten would basically just say Naruto and dunce as always, as they'd make their ways to their rooms. We'd also see that there's kind of a triangle of romance going on between Tenten, Lee, and Neji, with Tenten liking Neji, and neither Neji or Lee really liking her, but she would have caught feelings for technically both of them. When it came to Lee, he'd still have soul-hearted feelings for Sakura, but that wouldn't really change much, because he'd eventually work himself out of this. Even though Sasuke had been gone, she solely simps for him and wishes for his return, even though she had some progression to where she didn't do a lot of the things she did in canon, but she did say some worse things, putting everyone with her in a worse position. And this night, where she had gotten to connect with her classmates again, had basically brought back their faith in Sakura and what they thought about Sakura. As Sakura had finally redeemed herself in the eyes of her classmates, she feels accomplished. The next morning, most of the girls except Hinata would already be off. Naruto and Jugo had awaited Hinata outside of the hot springs to where they'd walk into the sunrise as it shimmered above the Hokage monument. The rest obviously being Kiba, Shikamaru, Choji, and even Shino would have stayed back for one last dip, as Neji and Lee were most likely off training. But time for slacking is over. Team 10 had been called in for a mission, and it seems important. The members of Team 10 that had been called for a mission were Shikamaru Nara and Asuma Saratobi. As they entered the building, they would reach Tsunades' office, greeted by a monk from the Fire Temple and the well-known gate guards of Konoha, Izumu and Kotetsu. Now, Tsunade would begin to explain the mission. They explained that two members of the Akatsuki that they know as Hidan and Kakazu had attacked the Fire Nation temple and had killed the head monk. This monk here had informed them, and as the village of the Land of Fire, they must actually take suit and try and stop these assailants. To do such, Tsunade had formed this little group that she calls the 20 platoons, which consists of the people you see here, being the gate guards, Asuma, and Shikamaru. She would send them off as they would go along the road that the Fire Temple monk would lead them on, to where they would track Kakazu and Hidan to a bounty check-in station, where they had given the monk's head for money. This would spark a battle in which Kotetsu and Izumu would take care of either one of the two, while Shikamaru and Asuma would take care of the other. We would get into a really rough situation where Asuma would give himself up, revealing his secret technique to save the three others on his team, having been the leader, thus his responsibility. This would send Shikamaru in a spiraling rage, not wanting to leave, but Izumo and Kotetsu basically knocking him out and taking him back to the Leaf, to where it would be reported that this had happened. Naruto, who had stopped by the Hokage office for basically a mission checkup to see if he could do any missions, would hear this, basically triggering him, having him disappear out of the Hokage office with a body flicker, appearing near the hospital where Shikamaru currently lays. As he gets there, he sees Shikamaru crying in his bed alongside teammates Choji Akamichi and Ino Yamanaka, along with Jonin Kurenai. These are all people that knew Asuma on a personal level, and Naruto remembers before he headed out, he had received some information from, obviously, Asuma, telling him the ins and outs to Winjutsu, just as every other Jonin had left Naruto with something before he set out on his journeys. To know that Naruto barely got to say hello to Asuma since coming back makes him mad. He is determined to figure out what happened to Asuma and have the people that done this perish. He would quickly try and get as much information from Shikamaru as possible, which would then just make him even madder because he didn't know exactly what happened, but now knowing that those two sadistic bastards, the one who would sell his head and the other that would torture his body for his god, has Asuma in their hands. Naruto begins glowing with the red aura as he walks out the hospital, burning the ground under him with chakra. Tsunade, who had finally got done with what she was busy with, the mission with Kotetsu and Izumu, would head to the hospital to try and find Naruto, because she knows he's not in a good mental state, especially when people he thought he cared about basically get done so dirty. Now, as she heads down, she sees Naruto storming out of the hospital towards the gate. She would use the body flicker to appear in front of a steaming Naruto, telling him to calm down. He'd break down into tears on the ground as his aura leaves him, crying into Tsunade's arms, asking why he can't protect anyone. Sure, him and Asuma never got that close, but it's someone he wished to keep dear. Last time he saw him, he was in a good mood. Him and Kurenai were happy together. And now, Kurenai's pregnant, because this is why she was in the hospital in the first place. Asuma can't even see his own child. The Akatsuki are after him. That's the only reason they're in the land of fire in the first place. So maybe he should give them what they're looking for and slaughter them. Tsunade would quickly tell Naruto to calm down, because if he does this, he will regret it. He is not strong enough, to which he says that he thinks that he is strong enough. Tsunade would then calm Naruto down further to where she could have a logical conversation with him. Seeing as Shikamaru knows their weaknesses, when Shikamaru is healed, they will be sent on a mission. For now, they want Naruto to hang back and have them check what all the jutsu in his arsenal are to see if he could actually add to the mission. Naruto would scoff at the idea that he'd be a nuisance and say that he has mastered Sage Mode, had mastered and added upon the Rasengan, which would of course intrigue Tsunade, wanting to know what he means by added onto the Rasengan. Naruto would look at his bandaged arm and say, "My arm wasn't always bandaged, if you can remember correctly. This happened while I was improving my father's jutsu." He'd stand still for a second as his eyes turn orange, going into Sage Mode, as he would form a giant Rasengan with a seemingly shuriken spinning around it. He'd say that this is the greater version of the wind-style Rasengan. He calls it the Rasen Shuriken. Easily the greatest wind-style jutsu ever created, he says confidently, as he lets it go. Tsunade asks him why he thinks this is the greatest jutsu ever created, or greatest wind jutsu ever created, as he says that had she heard about the mountain that was basically vaporized near the border of the land of wind. She would nod as he explains that that was the first time he had ever used this jutsu, not even to its peak. He is really confident in his ability to stop them, as he does not only know wind style, but is a great taijutsu expert, especially from what he could gather on Lee and Guy before leaving. They had left him with a few taijutsu scrolls that they had learned to make taijutsu easier, along with the frog style or frog komiti of taijutsu, which is a frog style of taijutsu, obviously. So he basically says that he'll wait, but he gives her a week at most. He would head back to the Hyuga compound where he'd find Jugo, telling him that he needs to let off some steam, so they should go train. They would make their way out of the village far. Tsunade, being curious, would follow them, for she never gave them permission to leave the village. Obviously, she knows that they're not going rogue, but just in case they do chase after, the Akatsuki, she decided to come along with two others, Kakashi and my guy. They would eventually stop upon an open field that looks like it had some battle happen on it before, for it is torn and have chunks of it blown away, as she sees Naruto and Jugo going to opposite ways of the field. They would stop in the trees looking at these two, as Jugo would power up into his berserker state, start laughing insanely, as he had immediately lost control going into this state. Confident that Naruto would be able to stop him, he did not mind going into this form. Naruto, on the other hand, would grow 4 tails, not going into the second stage quite yet, as he screams out into the sky, attacking Jugo. Every time they clash, a chunk of the ground beneath them is destroyed. Every jutsu Naruto throws is basically absorbed by Jugo, and a blast of pure chakra is thrown back. They're amazed. These two move as fast as even the Sannin, and they're still teenagers. Tsunade is amazed by this, just as Guy, thinking that these two are about as fast as a 5th gate Lee. That's the last gate he taught Lee. Maybe he'll need to push Lee's training up even further to increase his speed to the level of these two, he'd think to himself, as Kakashi would basically read his mind, telling Guy that might be a good idea. He should train Hinata some to try and keep up with Naruto too, because her new trick that she learned under Tsunade might not be enough. Tsunade would scoff as Kakashi would say this, and basically reply with, she had taught Hinata enough. She feels that Hinata's chakra absorption techniques would be enough to counter this. She just needs a little more speed. As Kakashi would smirk, as he knows that Hinata does make use of lightning chakra, meaning he might be able to improve her techniques even further than Tsunade did. Now, as the sun rises with the unconscious Jugo and Naruto on the ground, having fought through the night, Tsunade would wake them up with a healing touch. They would be surprised that they were there, asking them how long they've been there, with Kakashi basically replying with about 6 hours. Naruto would think back and say, that's about how long the fight's been going. With Tsunade saying that, yes, you Nimrods, we never gave you permission to leave the village, so we decided to follow you just in case you had gone after the Akatsuki. Naruto would end in a giggle, basically commenting that he had just blown off some steam, and that he's ready to get to training now, so what did she have in mind? Kakashi would gulp, hoping that Tsunade would not make him fight him again, so this would put a little stress on him till Tsunade would reveal that she is putting him with someone that she thinks would be a perfect match for him in his 9-tailed state. This person's name is Yamato. He is the last known Wid Release user, and she thinks that Naruto and him could get some good training done. He also has water style, so maybe him and Naruto could try and make some combination jutsu. As Kakashi would walk up and start explaining what they had heard from Shikamaru the previous day. They would explain the weaknesses to both Hidan and Kakuzu, saying that Shikamaru and his group would have to handle Kakuzu or Hidan, while Naruto, Kakashi, and Yamato would have to handle Kakuzu. What they know of is that he has multiple hearts and the fight might not be as easy as they thought. After about a week, Naruto and Yamato would have trained quite a bit, but there's no need to go over what exactly they did, as it would relate somewhat to canon in the Typhoon, and then just Naruto basically adapting the same jutsu but with Jugo. So the need for Yamato is basically none. with Yamato deciding to stick back as Naruto, Kakashi, and Jugo would be able to handle Kakuzu. Now, it is time for the mission to begin. The teams would prepare. The new Platoon 20 or 20 platoons would be the 2 Gate Guardians, Shikamaru, Naruto, Kakashi, Choji, Ino, and Jugo. They would set out. As they leave the village gates, they prepare, all running at shinobi pace towards the last known location of the Akatsuki.
Madara. On their way to the bounty station where they have word was the last place these 2 Akatsuki members were seen, they would discuss a battle plan. The previous remnants of Team 10 would take on the one that's seemingly immortal with the sight, while Kakashi, Jugo, and Naruto would handle the other. The 2 gate guards, Izumo and Katetsu, would hang back just in case another situation happened where they needed more backup. After that, this mission would be pushed down to being an Anbu level mission, and a platoon of Anbu would be set to deal with these. But they doubt that would ever be the case. The battle between Team 10 or the remnants of said against Hidan would more or less lead to canon. Where it would get interesting is Naruto, Kakashi, and Jugo's altercation with Kakuzu. It would for the most part start off the same. They would throw endless amounts of attacks seemingly at Kakuzu, with him barely being phased. He seemingly had all 5 chakra natures in. Eventually he got bored and had these 5 beasts come out, or at least 4 beasts, each which could wield an element. They would eventually figure that each of these beasts are only weak against its exact counterpart. So they start whittling them down. Winjutsu would be the rarest to come across. So Kakashi would start off. Lightning to water. He'd disband the water. Earth to lightning. Gets the lightning down. Water to fire. Yet another one down. When Jugo uses his curse mark Am state to attack another, seemingly killing it. It seems it works. Physical attacks can also affect these, at least if it's amped with nature energy, for when Jugo did it without his curse mark, it didn't really do much. So Naruto would tell them to keep a hold of it. He has an idea. As he jumps back and creates 2 shadow clones, he would sit down and then start generating sage energy. There would be 2, or at least one of these beasts left along Kakuzu himself. The 2 shadow clones would be finished along with Naruto, as they would just continue meditating while he runs forward. He would start bullying the one of the beasts that are left, throwing it between him and Jugo. Kakashi would look at the onslaught on this poor beast, because Naruto and Jugo themselves are seemingly beasts. He'd never seen shinobi move this fast or work so cohesively. As they would finally hit it into the ground, shattering the mask, which was seemingly its heart, as it would dissolve. Kakuzu would now be scared as he jumps back, throwing some jutsu, but it's too late. The Naruto shadow clones disperse and Naruto is up in the air. He had seemingly vanished and reappeared there. Most likely had used a body flicker, as there was this giant ball of energy in his hand, seemingly in the shape of a shuriken, as he throws it, screaming, "Wind style Rasengan Shuriken!" as he throws it at the Akatsuki member and it rips him to shreds, seemingly killing him. Now that the day is over, they stand there looking down on them. Hidan, buried and sealed in the Nara forest, and Kakuzu, dead, all of his hearts destroyed. It's time for them to head back to the Leaf. The 20 platoons has completed its mission and can now be disbanded.
Now we pan out to another face we had not seen in a while. Sasuke Uchiha, someone who had went over to the dark side in search for power. He had been training with Orochimaru these last 3 years. He had similar adventures to Naruto. He had met some new teammates, or at least potential ones, that he could recruit if anything ever happened. But if it could happen, we wouldn't be mentioning it. Orochimaru would decide that it's time for his new body, as the one he resided in was fading away. He would call Sasuke to his chambers and presume the Snake Sage transformation, as he tries to take over Sasuke's body. Sasuke would obviously not just let this happen and swiftly take care of a sick, demeaning Orochimaru, removing him, or at least believing he removed him, from the face of this earth. He would leave only for Kabuto, Orochimaru's previous servant, to take advantage of this. He would seemingly absorb the remnants of his master as he laughs out maniacally, as if there was something wrong with him. Sasuke, on the other hand, would decide to recruit said previously named potential teammates. He'd first make his way to a hideout with a bunch of Orochimaru's experiments. Not in the sense of the ones he had created, but those he wished to learn from. There was an individual that Sasuke found interesting. Someone who could match him in combat prowess, but not so in jutsu. This was Soigetsu. He was originally created by the Hidden Mist Village and experimented on by Orochimaru to see how he works. He could seemingly form and reform from water. It was an interesting concept to Sasuke and made for an excellent sparring partner that couldn't necessarily die in the traditional means. After gathering said person, he would convince him to head to yet another hideout, this time a prison of sorts, where they would stumble upon the medical Uzumaki known as Karin. Her ability stemmed from her Uzumaki heritage, allowing people to bite and suck on her basically. Not that way, you horny dogs. But her ability allowed her chakra to leave her body and bestow upon healing properties to those who are consuming it. Karin would at first try to deny the fact that she wants to join for the reason that Soigetsu, someone who she really does not get along with, is on the team. So she tried to threaten Sasuke and say that he has to remove Soigetsu, but even if he doesn't, she still has a crush on him, which she would constantly bring up. Sasuke would use this to his advantage and convince her to eventually join. She would ask, what about all the prisoners in this case, which to Sasuke would respond to Jugo, telling him to slaughter them. Pretty soon after, they leave a clean prison behind, or at least as clean as Bloody could get. Not a single soul left inside. They would head for the last person they had known about, someone named Jugo, a mysterious force that lived in the forest. Someone who was seemingly the originator, or at least his clan had been the originators of the Curse Seal. They had a Keke Genkai of sorts. Orochimaru had told him about this person many a time and told that Kimimaru, the one with the bone Keke Genkai, had been the one to usually tame this wild beast. They would go to the place where they had believed him to be and could not find him anywhere within miles. When they would head to the village nearby, the people would say that the beast had been taken away by some ninja from the leaf. Sasuke would scoff as he thinks Naruto had yet taken another thing from me. I will have my revenge, not only on Itachi, but soon him as well. As they set out. To where, you might ask? Sasuke, days before killing Orochimaru, had received a letter from his older brother Itachi, saying that he challenges him, a battle to the death, for his eyes. old Uchiha hideout outside of the Land of Fire. Meet him there with a date. Now they set off, but they're not the only ones to set off. Somewhere in the Land of Rain, a toad would seemingly spit out a human. Not a giant toad, your average sized toad, seemingly having infinite space inside of it. Heh, infinite. You could say something like that. As Jiraiya, the Sannin of the toads, emerges, he thinks that he had finally entered the rain. He can finally figure out what the Akatsuki are up to. But this goes roundabout as well as you'd think. Everything would lead up to canon until the Pain Altercation. This is where things would actually change. Jiraiya would start beating down on some of the Pains, even having summoned Lord Fukasaku and his wife. He had been in his perfect sage mode, or at least as perfect as his sage mode could get, casting genjutsu, using attacks, using every mean he could to whittle them down, until he discovers that there's a pain that could heal them. He decides that this pain needs to be taken out if he was going to be taken out. So he would discover or reveal something him and Naruto had discovered as he yells out, "Wind style, fire style, Rasen Shuriken," as he creates two spinning orbs similar to what Naruto did earlier. One completely composed of wind, the other blazing, as he throws them. One would be absorbed by someone that could seemingly absorb chakra. This would be the fire shuriken. Jiraiya would smirk as this was the imperfect one, the one he hadn't quite gotten down. The other one had seemingly missed, as the pains would start piling up on him. Jiraiya would lay there, taking the damage as he writes with chakra burns on Lord Fukasaku's back, one last message. He would start sinking down the water after the pains had started destroying his body, as the shuriken he had thrown earlier, or his chakra honing shuriken, rigged to explode, hones in, hitting the healing path. The one who could summon the King of Hell had been directly hit, and it exploded, him sinking down the water. Pain never being able to find his body afterwards. Pain, thinking that Jiraiya had escaped, would set a course for the leaf. But Lord Fukasaku had already made it there. He had reverse summoned and made it out of the well. Injured himself, it would take him some time, but Naruto would be called, informed of his late sensei's death. He would scream out as his cloak start going up, one-tailed, two-tailed, three-tailed, four-tailed. Even another tail would be dangerous, as this Naruto, in the first state of transformation, would go on top of the Hokage building, sprouting his fit, as he jumps, seemingly breaking the roof. Everyone inside would be surprised. Naruto had gone ballistic. Jugo would also stand there as his curse mark envelops him, his body changing. This time not like usual, where only half of his body would be affected. His entire body changed. He seemed like an animal, as fire starts spreading out of the back of his elbows and the soles of his feet. He would launch after Naruto, screaming. They do not know where these two are headed. But now left behind, Tsunade and Kakashi, left to solve Jiraiya's riddle. They already know they cannot stop Jugo or Naruto, so they might as well work. Kakashi would quickly find this weird symbol he had believed to be a 9 would be the way of Jiraiya writing something. This would lead to them eventually solving what this was. It was an amalgamation of pages and numbers, things that Jiraiya had written down in his series Makeout Tactics. As this would say, pain is coming. The Akatsuki will be there soon. Prepare. All the Leaf Shinobi, at least, Anbu, Jonin, Chunin, or Genin, would all be recalled to the village. Not knowing exactly where Naruto and Jugo went, they can't really do much except prepare for the imminent threat. Naruto and Jugo would soar through the sky, making their way to the land of rain. But who they will meet there might not be the same as they think they would. Now, Sasuke Uchiha hones in on the location of his brother Itachi. As he makes it to the entrance, his followers would be stopped by Itachi's teammate, Kisame. They would be told to stay back, for this is a battle between Sasuke and Itachi, not them. But if they want to fight, he could kill all of them right here. Obviously, Jugo and Karin would be up for it, as long as Sasuke gives the command, that is. But Sasuke would tell them to let down their arms. He'd go in alone, because he knows he will come out victorious as he heads into the hideout to meet his brother Itachi face to face. Sasuke sees his brother standing there, Sharingan blazing, as Sasuke attempts to stab at his brother. His brother would fall to the ground and disperse into crows, as Sasuke would look to the side, seeing his true brother sitting in a throne. So, brother, starting off the fight with your favorite genjutsu trick and the crows. As he says, of course, I will hear you out, brother, said by Itachi. Even though it would not be the last thing you say today, I'll hear it. As Sasuke's Sharingan would start blazing as he appears behind said throne, stabbing through it, believing he had hit the actual Itachi, saying that you're not the only one that can cast genjutsu, brother. Now, the same as that night, the crows, the genjutsu, the speech. All I wish to know is who was your co-conspirator, for you had talked about he that night. Not even you, brother, could have taken out the entire Leaf police force by yourself. Itachi, sitting with a blade through him and a smile on his face, would say, of course not, but at least you had figured it out. He was Madara Uchiha. Sasuke would then think, who's Madara? I feel a sense of deja vu. I don't really know who that is. Obviously, not having had the altercation with Kurama earlier, Sasuke wouldn't study into who Madara exactly was. But he feels ominous while hearing the name. He feels like he's heard it a million times before. It feels like he is this Madara. He felt like this name was attached to his soul as he plunges his blade further into his brother's chest. As this, Itachi continues to speak as if he had nothing wrong with him. He starts speaking. Madara Uchiha, one of the first to awaken their Mangekyo Sharingan, and one of the founders of the Leaf. As Sasuke's vision peels over that of the Valley of the End, the place where he had found or fought against Naruto. There he sees Hashirama and Madara, at least the two people he thought to be the village's creators. He had never thought one would be an Uchiha. But now, the fight will really begin. After Itachi had spoken about reality, Sasuke would scream out, "Yet I had seen the true reality," channeling his lightning into his hand, shooting it at the wall behind him, where his real brother had been standing all along. He claims his eyes are not the same. As their battle begins, it would start with some hand-to-hand combat, which wouldn't suffice for too long. Sasuke would try to hit, but Sasuke couldn't. Itachi had seemingly dodged every single blow, or deflected every single blow, at the very least. Itachi had been moving around Sasuke, claiming that his eyes had never changed, and never will, as he reveals his eyes. This, Sasuke, is the Mangekyo Sharingan, and the reason why I want your eyes, as he starts explaining the curse of blindness. Still in the middle of a taijutsu confrontation, Itachi starts explaining. The first time the Mangekyo Sharingan, or at least the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, was awakened was by Madara Uchiha, who had killed his younger brother and taken his eyes to perfect his own. The Mangekyo itself would usually cause chakra deficiencies and eventually cause you to go blind. This is due to the curse of hatred bestowed upon the Uchiha clan by the first Uchiha. But now, with his eyes, he would unlock the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan when Sasuke decides to jump back and throw a fireball jutsu at his brother. The fireball wouldn't do much as Itachi's Mangekyo catches Sasuke in a genjutsu, but this genjutsu is not ordinary. In here, Sasuke would see the life of Madara, killing his brother, or at least he thought this was what happened. In actuality, this did not. It was merely what Itachi wanted Sasuke to see. Something he wanted Sasuke to see to not trust Madara, or who he thinks is Madara. Then Itachi would step back, letting his brother go from this genjutsu, saying that, "Now Sasuke, with your eyes I will obtain power far surpass that of Madara's. I, Sasuke, shall become the greatest shinobi to ever live," as he throws kunai towards Sasuke. The fight had reinitiated. Sasuke would obviously not lay back. He would pour chakra into his wrist and out would pop shuriken, as he would throw said shuriken to Itachi, not leaving it just by that, flashing through Hantai saying, "Phoenix Flower Jutsu," as he shoots multiple tiny fireballs to encase the shuriken. One would rip off Itachi's robe, but the rest would all go wide. Now, the fight has truly begun. This is not going to purely be long range. So Sasuke throws off a Chidori and rushes towards his brother at blinding speeds, almost striking him, being grabbed by the wrist and threw to the side by Itachi. The battle is about to get heated. Sasuke and Itachi would get into another taijutsu confrontation when Itachi says, "Amaterasu," burning the cloak that Sasuke had on. Sasuke would ditch it, knowing this fire cannot be put out, as he knows to stay out of Itachi's direct line of sight. So he'd start amping his speed with chakra, and eventually would be forced to go into his curse mark state, where the fight would finally seemingly be even. When eventually Sasuke would feel himself being overpowered, he would have finally landed a Chidori straight to Itachi's stomach, but it didn't even penetrate, as Sasuke sees Itachi bleeding out of his mouth. This orange aura around him, the skeleton that had appeared. Itachi would start saying, "This, brother, is the ultimate power of the Mangekyo, the ultimate defense, the Susu," as he pukes up more blood. In this moment, something inside of Sasuke would be triggered. Someone who he had killed not too long ago would come out. Orochimaru starts seeping out of Sasuke's curse mark as he starts de-transforming. Orochimaru now sees an opportunity to take Itachi's body, but Itachi wouldn't let this happen, amping to the second stage of the skeleton, the full body. He would slap Orochimaru away as Orochimaru sees nothing else but to do. He would summon Manda, his also grateful snake summoning, the king of the snakes, who would tell Orochimaru he still owes him lives from the last time. But Orochimaru would promise that he won't need him after this, so their debt would be paid off soon. They would attack until Itachi would once again progress his Susanoo to near perfect, having the full armor but not the full look. As he develops a sword, he would cut through Manda, not dispelling him but killing him. Manda would be never summoned again. Orochimaru throws off as many jutsu as he can and sees only one thing left. He would merge with the snake parts left behind by Manda and become Orochi, the Dragon Sage, something created of both snake and human. As he decides he will face off against Susanoo. just as it played out in mythology and in original canon. Eventually, Itachi would use the Totsuka blade to defeat Orochimaru and seal him away. Or at least, that's what he thinks, as one last slither gets away. As in mythology, where Susanoo pulled the legendary Totsuka blade out of the dead body of Orochi, that would not happen here. This would be the final placement of the Totsuka blade, as Itachi, now near death, would walk up to Sasuke and pokes him on the head as he falls to the ground and dies. Sasuke would be in shock. He had thought that his brother would be able to defeat him. He can't fight on that level. He'd never be able to fight on that level, as he hears one last word from Itachi. I love you, Sasuke. As he slips away from his last moments of life. Now, Sasuke is left standing, falls to his knees, and screams out, "Why?" as another individual appears. Kisame, who had been on the outside, had felt his partner's death and would say that his time here is over. He would then be joined by someone who would emerge from the forest. This would be Zetsu. They would walk and be gone. With neither Karin nor Soigetsu having noticed Zetsu, they're surprised. They rush in to go check up on Sasuke, as they see Sasuke talking to someone who claims to be Madara Uchiha. Now, they're just gonna hear him out. After helping Sasuke to his feet, Madara, or who claims to be Madara, that Itachi had loved the leaf. The elders were the ones that made him destroy it. This would send Sasuke on a downward spiral, convinced he needs to destroy the leaf. He would use his team, Team Taka, to join the Akatsuki, just for the pure intent of eventually destroying the leaf. Somewhere else, Naruto and Jugo, who had been running for some time, both in their berserk states after having heard the news of the loss of their master, makes their way to the Rain Village to be encountered by a single individual, one of the paths of pain. This was the only path actually sent out of the Rain Village. He was to summon the rest of the pains when he got into the leaf. But not much would occur, as they would grab this pain, throwing him around until it decides it can't handle it anymore. Nagato would send the order to cast it, as it slaps its hands together, summoning Nagato. Or not Nagato himself, but who we perceive as Yahiko, the leader of the pains, along with every single path. The true battle will now begin. Naruto would then start just ravaging the pains in front of him. The same with Jugo. Jugo being a little slower than Naruto, as he doesn't have the power of the Nine Tails. Naruto had already progressed to his sixth tail, meaning he is more aggressive than he had ever been, and Kurama had almost taken over. In his mindscape, he would speak to Kurama. "So, you think we can defeat them while we're in this ballistic state?" Kurama would deny it. He would say he'd need to completely take over. He's seen that eyes. That's the old man's eyes. As he starts telling Naruto about the Sage of Six Paths. Kurama would explain the Sage of Six Paths was the man that created the Tailed Beast. He was the father of Tailed Beast and the god of humanity. He was the strongest man to ever live. And knowing that his eyes is in the possession of a mere mortal, this would be troubling. He's not even sure if he took over, if he could defeat him. But he would request Naruto, if it comes down to it, switch control. Naruto would nod as he takes back over the beast mode. He would then amp his way to the seventh tail, bones growing out from him. He would smack around the main path, being Yahiko, and eventually putting him in such a state where he thought he was dead. He would move on to some other pains, while Jugo had taken on to Naruto would have taken on the rest. As he thought that the 5 pains in front of them were all that were there, dead in front of them, they are suddenly attacked, hearing "Almighty
Push! Naruto would look back, seeing the Yahiko Pain, thought he had killed him. He doesn't know what's happening, as he sees a sixth Pain, walk out, summoning some creature from the ground. Jiraiya had destroyed this one. You're probably thinking, no, he had destroyed the original, but the path was already bestowed upon someone new. Just a little different person from who it was in canon, but that doesn't really matter. The paths would now all once again be functional. Now Naruto knows. He'd put Jugo on that Pain, but the other Pains would immediately try to start taking over. There are a ton of summoned beasts, overwhelming even of that of 8th-tailed Naruto to the progress he'd made. Naruto still in control, being impressive. They would start attacking, ruthlessly ripping apart the Pains for them to come back every time. When Naruto says, "This is enough," he'd scream out for Jugo to get back, and Jugo would regain control just enough to get out of the way. Now only his upper body affected by his transformation. He's trying to lower himself. He's trying to calm down when he feels something. He feels someone not too far away, and he spots a giant tree on the edge of a hill. He blasts off, going berserk once again, making sure he gets there. On the other hand, Naruto had progressed into the 9th tail, letting Kurama take over. But as Kurama had taken over, Naruto would talk to his father, Minato. Now in the mindscape, Minato would explain to Naruto that he had never meant for him in this life. Naruto would not act the same he did in canon. He would smile and say if it wasn't for him having the 9 tails, he would have never met Hinata, he would have never met Jugo. He would not be the person he is today. He's glad his father did all this. But Minato would say he needs to seal the 9 tails once again when Naruto denies him such action. Minato would obviously be stressed. Why would Naruto not want the 9 tails sealed? Does he want people to die? When Naruto starts explaining, him and Kurama had an alliance for years. Right about 4 years by now. They had gotten to know each other, and he'd even learnt his name. Kurama, not Kyuubi or Nine Tails. He is a sentient being that hates humans for the reason that Hashirama and Madara just appeared one day, forcibly sealing him away. The same to all his brethren. He can't really blame them for hating humans. Humans are the reason he can't live a normal life. As Naruto tells Minato the story of Kurama and how he used to look over our rice field, blessing the people with good harvests and a peaceful life. He had protected this place until Madara and Hashirama arrived, where he had lost all his beliefs in humanity and thought that it's a virus that needed to be extinguished. And Obito controlling him once again was just the tip of the iceberg. Nothing compared to the suffering he had endured. Minato would say about how Kushina had always talked about how evil the Nine Tails was when Naruto would punch Minato in the gut. Oh, you wouldn't be mad? You wouldn't be furious if someone tied you to a moon so that you couldn't move or even speak? Minato would see that Naruto had seen past the barriers that him and Kushina could never even have seen through. He had realized that the tailed beasts aren't monsters. Minato would say that he's happy that Naruto had come across this, and he knows it's not till tomorrow, but happy 16th birthday, as he fades away, Naruto regaining control of the Nine Tails, as he starts lowering in cloaks and tails, until he just stands there, looking into the sky, having lost the necklace that Tsunade had once given him. He claws his neck, not seeing it. He'd look around the battlefield and believe that it's gone, when he hears a voice in his head. Kurama says, "Over there, kid, to the right." As he looks, he sees this necklace, picking it up and putting it on, following the presents that Jugo had left behind. There, they'd be met face to face with Nagato, and Naruto would start talking, explaining how gruesomely he's about to kill him. Jugo had already chained or just held Konan to the wall, and for some reason she couldn't activate her techniques or take her paper form. Jugo's preventing it somehow. This is obviously just the influx of nature energy. He's preventing her from using her techniques by destabilizing her chakra network.
Nagato would say he'd hear Naruto out. All his pains are destroyed after all. He can't really fight in this condition. Naruto would start saying how he killed his master, now he would die himself. He'd hear Nagato start laughing. Jiraiya got away. I'm not even sure if he's dead. After that stupid Rasen Shuriken or whatever he called it landed, he escaped. I haven't seen him ever since. Naruto's facial expression would change. Jiraiya might be alive. It's a long shot. I did put 1,000 holes in him. But yes, Master might still be alive. Naruto and Nagato would start to exchange words as Nagato revealed the plans of the Akatsuki. Naruto had reminded him of someone he had seen long ago, someone he had followed long ago. This is Yahiko. They would exchange stories and Nagato would finally see that he's not the one that Jiraiya had wrote about. In fact, it had been Naruto. Naruto is the true child of prophecy. Naruto would look, smile, and say, "You're gonna die, aren't you?" He'd gasp and ask how Naruto would know, as Naruto points out the obvious. He could feel the life leaving Nagato's body, so it's just about time. He's gonna pass away eventually. There's not really much they can do now, is there? Nagato would smile and say, at least he had found the person that will change this world for the better. Now, Naruto Uzumaki, fix this wretched world that's full of nothing but pain. As he fades away into the stars. Nagato had died. Konan had been released, and she had given Naruto the location of the Akatsuki base. She'd say that Madara, the true leader of the Akatsuki, is planning an attack. He only needs 2 more Jinchuriki, Naruto and then the Eight Tails, who someone she believes him to know, Sasuke Uchiha, is on. He had been sent to gather the Eight Tails, so maybe head to the 5 Kage Summit, which should be coming up any moment now, as it had been called by the Raikage. Yes, some time had passed after Sasuke was already deployed for B, but that fight would not really have changed much. Naruto would then return to the village, requesting of Tsunade to take him. She would agree, taking both him and obviously Jugo as her guards. Now they arrived there and it would all start. The Raikage would claim he wants Sasuke Uchiha dead for taking his younger brother, when Naruto would say that he doesn't think Sasuke strong enough to take the Eight Tails on. Sasuke wouldn't even be able to handle his base for all he knows. Raikage would obviously say he saw them make off with his brother. Naruto would say that obviously he just didn't try hard enough. Tsunade would quickly mention that Naruto should be silent. This is basically intercation between Kage, not to be Kage, as Naruto would bow and apologize. He would say that he doesn't mind Sasuke's death as long as he's the one to kill him. After that altercation at the Valley of the End, where Sasuke left him with a hole in his heart, he kind of wants to repay the favor. Sure, he wants him back at the Leaf, but he had just passed to the Akatsuki, people that had caused his master's death. Nothing could make Naruto forgive Sasuke this time. Jugo would just nod as he senses something. Through the door burst Sasuke, but Jugo would have immediately blocked him with a curse mark and arm and throws him to the wall. Sasuke would remember this. This is that guy, Jugo. He felt the nature energy coming off of him. Oh, so I see. Naruto did take you, just as I thought. As Sasuke's team runs in behind him. Mei would have immediately threw lava at them, but now they're stuck outside of the room. Now a battle of Kage would happen. Naruto would stand back as the Raikage and Gaara would take care of Sasuke, for him to only be saved by Madara. They would obviously wonder how Sasuke had gotten so strong, and would say that why did Naruto not step in if he wanted to kill him so badly. Naruto said that it was a measurement of Sasuke's power. Obviously he had overpowered most people here, and if there wasn't a group of them, they'd already be dead. The Raikage said that he would have killed him, but Naruto would bluntly disagree. When Madara appears after having saved Sasuke from particle style. He would exclaim, "The fourth great ninja war." Obviously, they would call cap on him being Madara, and he'd say, "Oh well, guess you figured me out," as he removes his mask, revealing his true face. "I am Obito Uchiha," or what you could call Toby. Obviously, this would put a shocked face on both Naruto and Tsunade, for they know who this is. This was Kakashi's previous teammate, and would be really surprised that this is the case. Obito would then say, as he vanished, "End Hokage. Tell Kakashi I said hi," as his voice fluctuates back to normal. He disappears in a swirl, having left with this. He had summoned thousands of undead warriors, obviously done by the hand of Kabuto, and has thousands of Zetsu, which he had gotten by capturing a wood-style user that had been sent out on reconnaissance on the 7 and 3rd tails. They had caught him during the 7th tail raids, and he had progressed them much further than they ever could. Naruto would then say that their only hope is finding the 8 tails, which obviously the Raikage would say, "But they have him, how can we find him? For all we know, he's probably dead." When Naruto would disagree, he had let out a sonar, and a few miles out of the samurai village, he had sensed the 8 tails' presence, or more specifically the 9 tails had. This statement would confuse most of the Kage, asking him why the 9 tails would help him. He'd explained that he had become a perfect Jinchuriki a few years ago. He just doesn't abuse his power like the 8 tails. He prefers relying on his own. This would set it. Naruto and the Raikage would go out to find B, and then when they get back, he wants all the other Kage in the Land of Lightning, or the Cloud Village. He needs to speak to them. They will create the fourth great ninja war and the Shinobi Alliance. They will take care of this imminent threat known as Obito Uchiha, as they set out. It not being too long since the Pain attack, merely 2 or 3 months. The 8 tails attack had happened a little bit earlier as well, where Sasuke had attempted to take the 8 tails, but had only succeeded in taking a clone. This would have to be enough, Obito would state, as he knows that they had found the 8 tails. He would send out 2 of his recently teamless members. Now as a team, he sends Sasori of the Sand and Kisame Hoshigaki, the tailless tailed beast. They would arrive there around the same time as the group from the 5 Kage Summit, being Naruto, the Raikage, and his 2 followers. They would be there alone without Jugo, for Jugo had returned with Tsunade to the Leaf. Naruto had said to Jugo that he would be able to handle anything, as Jugo would believe him and safely take Tsunade back to the Leaf. She had been attempted to be ambushed by Danzo, who would have swiftly been killed, or believedly killed, by Jugo. He had gotten rid of one of the lives, meaning Danzo is down to Sharingan. And because he had attempted to kill the Hokage, he doesn't believe that his base for the Foundation would be safe. Where could he get a replacement Sharingan apart from Sasuke Uchiha? He had some of his spies on the Akatsuki and knows the whereabouts of Sasuke. That's where he'd make his way. He'd kill the last Uchiha standing in his way and take his eyes, as they would leave. Jugo would have obviously kept Tsunade safe, having taken all the damage himself and having killed every single person from the Foundation that had participated in this event, with Tsunade setting down the rest. On the other hand, Naruto and the Raikage would have gotten to be trying to convince him to come back. He would obviously try and refuse, but he can't really say no to his bro, especially when 2 stronger Akatsuki members had shown up. Stronger might be a strong word, as B would have to fight off against Kisame, and Naruto would this time destroy Sasori for good.
Kisame would have lasted a pretty solid while, but not long enough, as he had seemingly been killed and his sword had been taken by B. The Raikage would say that Naruto and B need to start training. They need to keep them safe, so somewhere where their presence cannot be diminished. The Waterfall of Truth. Naruto would deny this, saying he's read up on the Waterfall of Truth. It faces you with your darkness and forces you to overcome it so that you may enter. The Raikage would persuade Naruto to try it, with Naruto denying. He says his darkness and pain is a great deal of his power. Sure, he's not like Sasuke and only focuses on hatred to fuel himself, but his hatred does motivate him to push that little bit further, and he will fight in the front lines of the war. Now some time would skip past, and now gathered in the cloud is the 5 Kage and some other shinobi. They would decide the regiments for the war. Naruto and B would be backline, defense, and would also be helped by some other shinobi. The rest, or at least the leader of this war, would be the Kaze Kage. Obviously, the Raikage and Tsuchikage would have both wanted this position, but every other Kage had voted for Gaara, someone who was a strong leader and was a previous Jinchuriki. He's even encountered the Akatsuki. He knows the way they think, knows the way they move. So, he was the obvious choice as a leader. Now, regiment leaders. Kakashi, Darui, Shikamaru, and others. But, for more, they had discovered places, positions where these threats would pop up. This would have been by luck, but while scavenging, some Earth-style users had found battlefields where they had found coffins, which they believed to be for reanimations. Each of these places would receive one person. Naruto, on the other hand, had been meditating. He had planned on using Sage Mode during this war instead of his Nine Tails power, because Nine Tails power would make it too obvious where he was. So, skip forward. Most would go the same until the appearance of Naruto initially. He would hear that Tobi had finally shown his face, and would decide to take the front line. He would stand up and would start running, as the Nine Tails says that Naruto's not enough. Sure, he had no action while in Sage Mode, but take his chakra, go at least 4th tail to accommodate this threat. Naruto would accept, but it wouldn't be exactly the same. This time, he'd blaze out in a golden aura. What is this? As he looks at his hand. Kurama would say, I don't know, kid, but it's cool as hell. I'm assuming it happened because of you being in Sage Mode while we transformed. Naruto would say whatever, creating multiple clones to accommodate the war. And thus, it would go mostly canon. Not too much would stray from its original path. Until Naruto would die. This is where a lot would change. Sasuke would be alive, having not been killed by Madara. He would have never been faced with him in the first place. Taking his place would be Jugo. Jugo would have fought off against Madara relentlessly. He would have kept back the Madara who had not yet turned into the Ten Tails, but eventually would be left a husk of his former self. He had been thrown around more than even Naruto could ever beat him. He had laid there, de-transforming, seemingly dead, to only be found by Karin, Sasuke, and Sogetsu. Karin would say, Jugo, nice to see you again, as she starts healing him. He would jump up saying, Madara's heading for Master Naruto. I need to go. He passes out as Sasuke chops him in the back of the neck. Sasuke would say he knows where Madara is heading. Now it's time for him to prove that he's the ultimate Uchiha. Naruto, on the other hand, had been frozen in the middle of the battlefield. He had been taken into his mindscape and had been talking to his long dead mother. They had a conversation, and Kushino would apologize to the Nine Tails about how she treated him. She had viewed him just as everyone else, a monster. She should have known better. She was sought as that, so her sawing him like that would just be mind-breaking. Kurama would forgive the dead woman in his mind, as Naruto would get to say goodbyes to his mother. He would explain that he had seen his father, and this conversation from here on out would go more or less the same, with one key difference. Jubito, or Obito in the Jubi state, had just been killed by Madara, or had been released of the Ten Tails by Madara, as Madara had grabbed the Ten Tails, absorbing it into himself. Now he's an eye short. He needs to find Obito, as he sends Black Zetsu after him. He would see Naruto standing there. Might as well kill the Nine Tails brat while I'm at it, as he shoots some unknown object at Naruto. This is when Naruto would awaken, chains breaking out of the ground, grabbing onto all the Ten Tails spawns around him, pushing them so hard that they somehow just disappear. He had absorbed all their chakra, and now he is refueled and ready to battle. The object that had been sent at him was slapped to the side by an adamantine chain, that of the Uzumaki, but his wasn't the normal gold. It was red and yellow, the embodiment of what it would be to be the Nine-Tailed Jinchuriki and unlock your Uzumaki chains afterwards. Him and Kurama had a perfect bond. Now, as the chains come together and swing behind him as tails, right out of his back, he would charge at Madara, knowing that Madara is the only thing standing in front of them. Sadly, he would get mollywopped. Not killed, for he had gotten away. But he would not be the only individual there. There along him is another figure, similar in stature and age. This is Hamura Otsutsuki, the brother of Hagoromo. These two would now explain separately. Hagoromo would explain to Sasuke, and Hamura would explain to Naruto the history of themselves, and also Ashura and Indra. They would then merge the two rooms, per se, together, now to where Sasuke and Naruto are in the same. When they start explaining, they had put themselves alongside the reincarnation cycle. Originally, they had hoped to have gotten their leaders or something, but something happened, and Hagoromo had reincarnated along with his son Indra, and Hamura had reincarnated along with Ashura into the two of them. Up until this point, they had never planned on being reincarnated, but seeing as it would fail every time, they had tried to intervene. Naruto and Sasuke are way more powerful than they could ever imagine. Here, they shall end this. They had ended the curse of hatred with Indra and Ashura blazing beside them in form of chakra. Now, Madara and Hashirama, also in form of chakra, would appear. Every single reincarnation in between as well. These chakra forms would all now suddenly force themselves into Naruto and Sasuke, making them forcibly regain all their memories of each reincarnation. Sasuke seeing every single time he had betrayed the ones he loved. Suffering is all he caused. He could finally end it. And Naruto, having never succeeded to bring back Sasuke, or at least Indra in this case, he would see that he had finally done it. He had succeeded. But not only that, they would see the lives of Hagoromo and Hamura as they disappear from in front of them. Naruto now the mark of the moon on his hand, and Sasuke the mark of the sun. I would like to intervene and say yes, I did change this part just because it kind of makes sense of Hamura being residing on the moon, so I kind of just switched it around real quick. I hope y'all don't mind too much. As they get memories, Naruto's eyes start hurting as his eyes go white. Then they form, his veins popping, his eyes different. They had white turquoise type pupils with a black outer line. This was not the ordinary Byakugan, but the Jogan, a gift from being the reincarnation of Hamura. And Sasuke would know he would possess the ability of every single one of his
incarnations or reincarnates before him and their Mangekyo. They had now many new abilities, which I will be naming. Naruto would now possess the Jogan evolution to the Byakugan and some other abilities. From his reincarnates, he would gain Wood Style. On Sasuke's end, he would have the evolved Mangekyo, Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, which is an amalgamation of previous Mangekyo Sharingan users in his direct line of reincarnations abilities, which will not be going over too much. From his reincarnates, he would gain Scorch Release. Both Naruto and Sasuke would have Yin and Yang Release, meaning both of them would have Yin Yang Release and would gain the Truth Seeker Orb abilities. To accompany Naruto's KCM, Sasuke would be able to manipulate his Susanoo armor to being the perfect fit to fit his body. Naruto would have near light speed travel. By turning his body into chakra, he could move at the absolute pinnacle of speed that chakra can move, meaning close to the speed of light, while Sasuke would gain a teleportation ability. Naruto would have an ability similar to the Hyuga's 360 vision called Omni-Viewing. He can see everything simultaneously and equally in a certain radius around him, let's say roughly a mile. Where Sasuke would have a semi-precognition, actual prediction to the future. Instead of just predicting what your opponent will do, he'd actually be able to somewhat see their movements. Not exactly on point or perfectly timed, but would somehow be able to see it. Naruto would have Chakra Vision, similar to how Boruto could see the darkness within someone. We're changing it so that he could separate chakra signatures. So, where normal Hyugas would be able to see chakra itself, he'd be able to distinguish two different people's chakra. So, let's say that an Otsutsuki had taken over someone's body, he'd be able to see two different chakra signatures within said body. He'd be able to view nature energy, Tail Beast chakra, human chakra, which is normal chakra, and distinguish upon those itself. Let's say someone is in a Genjutsu. He'd be able to see a cluster of chakra, which is differently colored from the one that he can see on that person, going around their mind, simulating obviously that. Sasuke, on the other hand, to accompany this, would have a chakra manipulation feat, which allows him to make his opponent lose their control of their chakra due to his visual prowess. Naruto would have basic things that he had, perfect sentry, perfect chakra control, and Sasuke would have things like Inferno style flame control, Susanoo, all that type of stuff, Genjutsu, Tsukiyomi, all that, which he would have already had as an Uchiha. And then both of them would have an ability I call Otsutsuki form. The progression of them turning into Otsutsuki had started. They had regained all the memory of their previous reincarnates, including Hagoromo and Hamura, meaning something similar to a Karmasi would happen. Their bodies would now start progressing into that of an Otsutsuki as times go on. Now they would appear in front of Madara, back in their bodies, which had disappeared from the point where they were being healed. Naruto away from Sakura, and Sasuke away from Karin. Guy had just been fighting with Madara, as Naruto would bow down to heal old Might Guy, laying there scorched to a crisp. They would now defeat Madara once and for all. Now faced with their current greatest enemy, they prepare. They would form Truth Seeker Orbs, the only weapon they know that can harm Madara. Sasuke would form his into two buttons, while Naruto would just leave his to rotate around him. He has something in mind. Maybe he could use this to amp his taijutsu in sorts. So now the battle begins. Sasuke would lunge forward, trying to slice at Danzo, trying to do as much damage as possible in a fatal attack. But Madara, having the traditional Rinnegan abilities, would use the almighty push to push Sasuke away. Naruto, seeing this as a moment, he would run in and chug his hands forward. Yin Yang style palm strike. as the true secret orbs that had been floating around him formed palms, hitting Madara and doing actual damage. Him and Sasuke would have a back and forth, basically pinballing him in between them. Naruto covering his hands in said true secret orbs, and Sasuke just hitting him back and forth with the batons. Eventually, they would get him in between their attacks, splitting his body in two. Madara's lifeless body would fall on the ground. Naruto and Sasuke would turn away looking into the sky. But they would feel a dark presence, one they had felt before. Or did they? It's not them that have felt it. It was Hagoromo and Hamura. They had felt the presence of their mother. Now, Naruto and Sasuke would be struck by a new knowledge, as they see a new being rise in front of them. Kaguya, she had 2 blazing Byakugan, and a 6 Tomoe Sharingan, it seems, combined with a Rinnegan. They don't really know what this is, since Naruto had the Jogan, an evolution to the Byakugan, but Sasuke only had the evolved Eternal Mangekyo. Quick reminder, I will be giving Naruto the Tenseigan, and I will be giving Sasuke the Rinnegan, but not till much later in the progression of the series, most likely nearing the end of part 3. I just like to point that out real quickly. Now we could get back to the story. Naruto and Sasuke had felt like they had lost themselves. They're no longer Naruto and Sasuke. They are many people, but they're also themselves. They would now stand up. They look at the seals on their hands as they realize the meaning. They need to get her in between these 2 seals. They need to seal her away, but she needs to stand still. So now the fight will continue. Kaguya, now having only awakened, does not have all her bearings together, but her eyes shimmer as she sees freedom. Naruto and Sasuke, on the other hand, aren't going to let her get a head start. They're going to attack her and get as much damage in as they possibly can. They would try a similar strategy to Madara, but she would quickly gain her bearings and never really stand still. She would start teleporting them through dimensions rapidly, trying to lose them, until she eventually, once again, flashes back into the normal world, where Hinata, Kakashi, and Obito would join the fight. Kakashi and Obito both still only have one of the eyes, and Hinata had already exhausted herself, barely being able to sustain her 100 healings. But this doesn't mean they're gonna let their teammates down. They would now join the fight. Hinata would blaze what she had left into her hands to form her twin lion fist, bigger than they ever were, while Kakashi and Obito would try and deflect and get rid of every attack Kaguya threw. If it be truth seeker orbs in the shape of spikes, or if it be some odd chakra-based jutsu. As they flashed through dimensions, they would stop nearly every attack. Eventually, Obito and Kakashi would almost lose, when Obito would tank a hit for Kakashi, taking out his one last good eye and putting it in Kakashi's hand. Hinata would jump back as Naruto and Sasuke would get back into the fight, better and stronger than ever, chakra seemingly rejuvenated out of nowhere. They know that they might need to step it up soon. They know there are more Otsutsuki out there, for they have the knowledge of Hamura and Hagoromo now. So, if they want to be people stronger than Kaguya, without needing to seal them away, they're going to need to progress their eyes and bodies to the next level. They would start piling down on Kaguya as Hinata would help Kakashi implant his new eye. Now, Naruto and Sasuke are seemingly once again on the down low. It had seemingly been a back and forth until now. Naruto leading, then Kaguya leading, Sasuke helping, and then falling back once again. Now, they're almost put in a situation where Kaguya would beat them. But you see Kakashi raise up with a glorious blue Susanoo as he throws shuriken seemingly made out of the same material as Naruto's true secret orbs, that, as on context, transports her to Kakashi's Kamui dimension, as he would take them there as well. Now they're on equal terms, no more teleporting. They can now defeat Kaguya here once and for all. But Kaguya just getting stronger and stronger the longer she's awake doesn't really help. Naruto and Sasuke would fall back as Hinata goes in for an attack, but as her hand was about to land on Kaguya's face, absorbing a chunk of chakra, Kaguya would grab her in, pulling her in close and seemingly kissing her, as a black mark comes off of Kaguya's body, transporting to Hinata. Hinata would fall onto the ground as Kakashi would go out of his Susanoo form to catch her. What is this? She had merely fainted. Nothing much is wrong with her, at least to what they could see. But they need to focus on the fight. So Kakashi would once again reinstate his Susanoo to prepare for this fight. They would pile down on Kaguya, eventually getting the upper hand. Naruto using his true secret orbs and some of the chakra from the tailed beast to create these little orbs that had multiple Rasengan looking orbs inside. This was obviously a translucent orb with different elemental Rasengans seemingly inside. It was almost like a Biju bomb with multiple elements that Naruto would seemingly shoot from his mouth. He had progressed even past that of a Biju bomb. He had mastered the jutsu that Ashura and his father had created before him. And now it would come to fruition, as they would damage a god. They would pile down on her, basically giving her nowhere to go until they see she can't do anything. She's stuck in a corner as she starts flying upwards, only to be hit back down by Kakashi. When Naruto and Sasuke see their chances, they would rush up, activating their seals, wrapping around Kaguya, and ending this war. Now they would move back to the battlefield, as Kakashi would kamui them away. Now back on the battlefield, Naruto looks for the only medical shinobi he knows other than Hinata, being Sakura. Obviously, Shizune would be another option, but he doesn't really know where she is. So he'd head back to where he last saw Sakura and would present her with Hinata. He would say she had been kissed by the Otsutsuki and then had fallen flat after these black markings had covered her body. Sakura would do some scans and say that somehow her body is in better condition than anyone she's ever seen. It's not necessarily optimal condition, but she doesn't seem hurt at all. Her body seems to constantly be regenerating itself, but she doesn't necessarily know. Maybe just give her some sleep. They'd head to the medical camp where Tsunade and Shizune would give the same analysis. And then Naruto and Sasuke, along with Kakashi, would be implemented too. Naruto would be able to heal his own wounds and even Kakashi's, somehow giving Kakashi the ability to untransform his Sharingan not only from the Mangekyo but completely, being able to see through normal eyes once again. This would put a smile on Kakashi's face, knowing that Obito would be with him forever and he'd never have to be ashamed of closing his eyes. Now, Kakashi would be presented as the next Hokage. Sasuke would leave the village feeling like he had sinned. Ino and Sai would have gotten together. And Naruto and Hinata would have had a kid. Hinata herself would not have known she was pregnant, but Neji had, and he had taken a stake to the heart from the Ten Tails to protect her. He didn't want anything happening to the child growing inside of her. He wanted it to flourish just like his dad and mom did. For where he had failed, this child would succeed. Rest in peace, Neji Hyuga. Now, Naruto has nothing to do but train. He will become a god, just like Hamura and Hagoromo before him. Until the next time he sees Sasuke, he will drive forward, always becoming stronger.